Hi, everybody. This is Paul Lockhart, retired aviator, astronaut, sometime explorer, all that. I am very, very excited that I get to spend time with you today. Gosh, I can't believe that I'm talking to you from Virginia. You're in Oklahoma. I visited there many times. Did you know I was born not very far away from you in Amarillo, Texas, and it was underneath those big skies out in the center of the United States in Oklahoma and Texas where I first got my love for space. Space, yeah, that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk to you about space flight. And you know how I'm going to start that? I have I have a little model of an airplane. Wow. Why do I have a model of an airplane? In fact, this is a propeller airplane. And this is a jet aircraft. Wow, why am I showing you that first? Because, of course, we want to talk about rockets today, really, and how rockets are used to get into space and why they have to look the way they are and how we operate rockets to get humans and payloads into space and come back. But why did I start out with airplanes? Well, I don't have a model of the Wright brothers' first airplane that flew in 1903, but I can tell you only about 30 years after the Wright brothers first flew, this airplane first flew, right? This is an AT-6 Texan. This was a trainer aircraft, and as you can see, it's got big wings, right? Big wings, a propeller, and the propeller is what gave the airplane the thrust to go forward. Right? And then the wings gave it the lift to climb. And then you have other flight control surfaces we call ailerons that allow you to turn. And then it's got a rudder in the back that kept you straight and so forth. So that was an airplane 30 years after the Wright brothers first flew. Then, if we go another 25 years or so after that, wow, now we're into jet aircraft, right? Now we no longer have a propeller. We have jet engines in the back right through here. So we got the thrust that carried the airplane through the air, through the jet engines in the back, but you still had wings that gave you lift. Oh, look at those wings. Those wings are a little different. They're tapered. They're not straight like these wings. Now, why is that? Well, there's two different purposes for these airplanes. This was a trainer. This was a military aircraft, but the speeds that they operated in are much different. This is a much slower airplane, right? The propeller can only pull you through the air just a couple of 100 miles an hour. However, a jet aircraft, it's got to move faster through the air. And therefore, we found, using science and technology, that you best had flight conditions. In other words, the plane flew the best when the wings were tapered in the back, swept back like this, because that delayed the onset of certain kinds of things that made the aircraft not fly very well. Well, let's look at a rocket right here. This is a rocket. Doesn't look like an airplane at all, does it? I don't see any wings on this one. I don't see any tail on this one. What I do see is this long cylindrical body right through here, and then some more smaller ones on the side right through here. And then kind of a pointed surface at the top. Oh, hang on. Little pointed surface at the top right there on this airplane. So, what is it about this that makes it different from that airplane there? Well, this rocket has to get into space. And so, it has to use the thrust coming from not jet engines, but rocket engines, which are different because jet engines use the air in the atmosphere to ignite the fuel to give us the thrust, whereas here in rocket engines, they carry everything they need inside in order to lift the rocket into space. So, you know what? Gosh, a few years ago, I had the wonderful opportunity to fly in space for NASA, and I helped build the International Space Station, and I launched on a spacecraft called the Space Shuttle. So here's a model of it. It's going to look like a rocket, isn't it? Ready? Bingo. Uh-oh. What's this? I don't see any rocket engines. I don't see what looks like solid rocket motors on the side, but I do see wings and a tail. Why is that? I mean, Colonel Lockhart just told me that rocket engines and rockets themselves generally don't have wings. Well, why is that? Well, because the space shuttle was a unique aircraft. In fact, it was a unique spacecraft because the space shuttle, look at this picture right through here. The space shuttle lifted off like a rocket, but when it got into space, it became a spacecraft. And so when it lifted off, in this picture that you can see right through here, you can see this solid rocket booster, and you can see this orange fuel tank, which is sitting right through here. And down below, you can see the main engines of the space shuttle, and you can see the ignition of one of the solid rocket boosters here. Well, let's come back to this rocket right through here. This is an unmanned rocket, but look, see this? Solid rocket booster, just like on the space shuttle. And this right through here would probably be a liquid-fueled rocket engine, just like in the space shuttle, because this external fuel tank right through here contains all of the liquid propellants needed to give this rocket engine lots of thrust, and then you add on the solid rocket boosters on either side. And when you do that, you give the space shuttle lots and lots of thrust, which allows you to counteract gravity, counteract the atmosphere as you lift off, and to get into space and stay there. Well, why can't an airplane do that? Well, let's figure this out. Here's an airplane. Who knows how much it weighs? Maybe 10,000 pounds or so. But it doesn't have a lot of thrust. Now, it'll have a lot of thrust enough for it to fly through the air. And let's say I went really, really fast, and then I pulled the nose of this airplane straight up and tried to climb up out of the Earth's atmosphere. Well, I would climb up for a little bit, but then Earth's gravity would be more than the thrust given to this airplane by the propeller. And so the plane would go up, 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 and then all of a sudden the thrust and the pull of gravity would equal, and then all of a sudden the airplane would start slipping back down, and then to stay stable, well, we'd have to do this in order to fly the airplane out of it. So now, let's go back to this aircraft right through here. Look at this. This was an F-4. I used to fly this airplane a long time ago, too, except this is a Navy version. I flew the Air Force version right through here. So, hang on just a second. I'm going to have a cup of coffee, a little bit. You know, I like my coffee also in space, but guess what? You can't drink coffee like that in space. I'll tell you why in just a little bit, because it's kind of part of what we're talking about today. So here's this F4, and I go faster and faster and faster. In fact, I can go faster than the speed of sound, and that's because these swept wings allow me to cut right through the Earth's atmosphere nice and smoothly, and then I accelerate faster and faster and faster, and then I pull up and I go up really, really, really high and really, really fast. And you know what? Eventually, the thrust from these engines right here can exceed the pull of gravity, and the F4 will start to fall down, and then I better kick it over and fly this F4 out so I'm nice and stable and can come back and land. So, airplanes, air-breathing aircraft, like the propeller, which needs air to generate the forward thrust, and these jet engines, which need air, and the air goes in right here in this intake on both sides and then mixes with the fuel back here and then is shot out here, the thrust. Well, those are limited to flying in the air only. So, two important things out of that. They don't have enough thrust to get the aircraft out of the Earth's atmosphere and counteract Earth's gravity. And besides, in space, guess what? There isn't air, right? Now, there's always a few air molecules until you get far away from the Earth, and that's all far, far away. But basically, the Earth's atmosphere is contained within, who knows half of the Earth's atmosphere, the density of it decreases at 20,000 feet. Well, airliners fly above that, but nonetheless, there's not enough air for an engine in an aircraft to work in space. But what about this, the rocket? Well, how does this then work to get us into space? Well, first of all, guess what? Doesn't need air. So this rocket will lift off, and all of the thrust comes from the solid rockets and also the liquid engines that are in this rocket right through here. And gee, you may be asking me what's the difference between a solid rocket engine and a liquid propelled rocket engine. Well, a solid rocket engine has just exactly that. The fuel inside, you know, like your parents have a car and they fill it up with gas and everything like that. Well, that's a liquid gas. Well, in these solid rockets right through many of these places, like in the space shuttle main engine, or not the main engine, but the solid rocket boosters on the side right through here, that's all solid propellant. And you know, it feels a little bit like the end of an eraser on a pencil. It's kind of squishy and it's not really compact, really hard, but it's also not liquid. And it burns. And when a solid rocket is lit, in other words, it's ignited, well, you can't stop it. And that's a very important thing. So when we fly the space shuttle and when people are going to fly on our next rockets for NASA, that's a very important point, because we have to make sure that the engines or the solid rockets are working along with the liquid engines before we want to lift off. So here's the space shuttle right through here. So solid and liquid. So everything is contained in this whole thing right here called the space shuttle, space transportation system right here to get us into space. I don't need the air around. In other words, there's no intake that comes in and brings air in and then mixes with the fuel and then shoots out and lifts the space shuttle up to get into space. Nope. Everything comes from the liquid right through here and the solids right through there. And here's the big difference. There's a lot of thrust right through here. This is 1,000,000 pounds of thrust. The other one's another 1,000,000 pounds of thrust, the solid rocket on the other side. And then inside of here is the liquid propellant, and the liquid propellant has 3 engines in the space shuttle that use it, and I'll show it to you right here. See those 3 big engines in the back right through there? Hopefully you can see that. There we go. I think I got those 3 big ones right through there. Well, those 3 engines burn the liquid fuel right through here, and they burn it really fast. And each of them produces about 350,000 pounds of thrust. So altogether, that's 3,000,000 pounds of thrust. So you know what that means? That means the space shuttle, when it lifts off, right, in that picture I just showed you, so pretend that the external tank is in here. When it lifts off, it goes faster and faster. And like an airplane, which when it goes up, the airplane's going to slow down, the space shuttle continues to accelerate, and it goes faster and faster and faster. And that's because all that 3,000,000 pounds of thrust is much more than the weight of everything combined, so it's accelerating, and we even make the space shuttle system lighter because we're burning the fuel so fast that the thrust of the space shuttle itself gets more and more compared to the weight of the whole thing. So the space shuttle accelerates into space. And you know how long it takes us to get into space? 8.5 minutes. That's not long, right? That's to get about 250 nautical miles into space. And that's a lot. So how fast do we have to go to get into space? Well, the next big part of all of this, of course, is we have to get up above the Earth's atmosphere, and we have to stay in space. So we end up going about 17,500 miles an hour. And the speed of that is dependent upon how high you're going above the Earth and, you know, what you're trying to do. So the space shuttle always orbited around 250 to 300 nautical miles above the Earth, and it had to go about 17,500 miles an hour for it to stay in orbit. Now, well, what does that look like? Well, here's a picture of our second launch right through here. So hopefully you can see that, right? Here we are. This is a time-lapse photo, so this didn't just happen at one time. I'm trying to get it to where you guys, there we go. So here's the space shuttle lifting off, and then you can see us arcing as we move to get into orbit right through there. Isn't that a beautiful picture? That's a night picture. That was my second mission right through here. So here we are at zero velocity down here, and we lift off, and we immediately start accelerating because the space shuttle's thrust is much more than the weight of the space shuttle step. So we're going faster and faster and faster. And then we get above the thickest part of the Earth's atmosphere, and we start to bend over, and we start accelerating above the Earth's atmosphere. So now we're above all of the drag that the Earth's atmosphere contains. And what do I mean by drag? Well, if you've ever, very carefully, while your parents are driving slow, if you've ever kind of had your hand out next to the window of your car and you feel all of that air pushing against your hand, well, the same thing. So the space shuttle feels that as it lifts off and it goes faster and faster. All right? But we get above the Earth's atmosphere, but then the next game that you have to play is, can I go fast enough to stay in space? Because guess what? If you don't go fast enough, what's going to pull you back down? Gravity. Oh, right here. See that right through there? That's for my second mission. Remember that I told you right here, that this launch right through there? That's a night launch. This was a day launch, right? So it's not nighttime. So this is my first launch, STS-111. This is my night launch, STS-113. And this is my patch from STS-113. I think it's kind of neat, don't you? So anyway, we have to go fast enough to stay in Earth orbit. Well, what does that mean? Well, if I change 17,500 miles per hour into feet per second, and I know that's a hard conversion, but that's how we in NASA think about it, and you'll understand why in a second. It's around 25,250 or 25,500 feet per second. That's going really, really fast. And if we are not going that fast, say we're only going 24,000 feet per second, well, guess what's going to bring us back to Earth? It's going to say, no, you're not staying in Earth. You're going to come back. Earth's gravity, right? Remember this airplane right through here? I go up, 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 up. I don't have enough speed to counteract gravity. I'm going to come back down. The other aircraft's the same. Well, the space shuttle's the same too. If the space shuttle gets into orbit, and it's in orbit over the Earth, and it's not going the right speed, well, then eventually that orbit is going to what is called decay, and it's going to be pulled back down towards the Earth, and then it's going to hit the Earth's atmosphere, and then it's going to really start to come towards the Earth and find a path that would intersect it with the Earth somewhere. Okay, so our job then is to take this space shuttle, and we're going to go into space. And let's say that we're doing the right speed. We're at 17,500 miles an hour. Well, you know what we're doing then? We're going around the Earth. We're going from west to east. And, I'll save that for another lesson someday, other than just to know that the Earth's rotating from west to east. So we always want to go with it because it's easier. So we're going around the Earth now at around 250, 300 nautical miles an hour. We're going 17,500 miles an hour approximately, or about 25,500 feet per second. We're going around the Earth right through here. So here we are. And we do that in about 90 minutes. So we see a sunrise every 45 minutes and then a sunset every 45 minutes. And we're able to stay on orbit doing that. So that's really neat. So these wings and this tail then allow us to fly around in space, right? If I need to, look to the left, I'm just going to fly like an airplane to the left, right? Like an airplane here, it's going to turn to the right, it's going to go like this, so the space shuttle is just going to go turn to the right. Nope, that's not the case. These wings are not useful in space, right? Just like an airplane, the space shuttle, with its wings, can only use them when we're going through the air. So why have them in space? Well, you know why? Because the space shuttle was the first reusable human-rated spacecraft. And what do we mean by that? Well, the whole idea of the space shuttle was to launch into space, open this payload bay, and now you can see equipment inside and things of this nature. And we were going to build things in space, live there for a while, and then after 10 to 14 days, we're going to come home, and we're going to fly this space shuttle through the Earth's atmosphere. And when we got low enough into the Earth's atmosphere, no longer are we in space, but we're back inside the Earth's atmosphere, and we're moving fast enough that, you know what? The wings now are just like an airplane. The air flows over these wings. The air flows over this tail right through here, and we can now fly the space shuttle like an airplane, except there's one big difference. The F4 has 2 jet engines that it can use in the air, right? Uses the fuel that it carries inside, like the fuel tanks inside. And the propeller, of course, this AT-6 Texan has a propeller, so it has a fuel tank. And so it can maneuver once it gets in the air under its own power a bit. Well, guess what? The space shuttle has nothing. It's a big glider, and a big glider means that it has no propulsion on it, but it has speed. So what we have to do is convert that 17,500 miles an hour or 25,500 or so feet per second. We have to convert this into energy so that we can fly. So how we do that? We come in through the Earth's atmosphere really fast. And then, again, if you've ever very carefully, kind of had your hand in a moving piece of air, perhaps on a bicycle or something, you know how you can feel the air pushing your hand around? Well, same thing on the space shuttle, but you have to imagine we're going really, really fast. So the air flows over these wings, and now the space shuttle, even though it's a glider, we can fly the space shuttle down, and we can land it like an airplane, which makes it a lot different, because then we can reuse it. Now we have to do a lot of work on the space shuttle before we can use it again. We have to make sure it's safe and fix everything, because that's really hard, but we can do that. So in this picture right through here that I have for my mission, see that beautiful blue Earth there and all those clouds? Isn't that gorgeous? Well, you can see the back part of the space shuttle. Let's see if I can kind of get this kind of the same right through there. You're kind of looking at it probably a little bit like this, right? You can see the tail of the space shuttle there, and it's in orbit, and you can see the back part of these areas where we had some fuel for some on-orbit thrusters that we need, which we'll talk about in a second. But that tail is not useful in orbit. Can't use it, no air. So how did we maneuver the space shuttle in air? Well, we had thrusters all around the space shuttle. See these little black dots that are on the nose right through there? Hopefully you can see those. There's like 3 of them there. There would be a bunch on this side. There's some back here that you can't see. And those are small rocket thrusters, meaning they don't use air. They're rocket engines, but they're small thrusters. And in orbit, we can change the attitude and point the space shuttle where we want. It would be somewhat like, so I can change the orbital attitude of the space shuttle flying through space, so it can go this way, or it can even go this way, because it doesn't matter. There's no air up there, right? And then when it comes time, we use these small engines back here, not the big engines, but these small engines, and we slow down just a little bit. So if I'm going this way, I'm going to point my space shuttle this way, thrust those engines just a little bit. I'm going to slow down from that 25,500 feet per second, and now I'm going slow enough now where I can pull or rotate my space shuttle around using those thrusters. And now, as I said, I'm not going fast enough to stay in orbit, and Earth's gravity starts to pull me back down towards the Earth, and then I enter the Earth's atmosphere, and now the space shuttle, in a way, it transitions from being that on-orbit spacecraft to being a transonic vehicle or hypersonic vehicle, and then transonic meaning it's still going faster than the speed of sound. And this, too, is a supersonic vehicle, right? So both of them could be coming through the Earth's atmosphere, as we're descending down, except this has engines and this one doesn't. And so now the space shuttle can come in, and then once it gets down into the thickest part of the Earth's atmosphere, it can really fly and maneuver. And she flew like a beauty. You could really fly this space shuttle. And guess what we do? I'm coming down to the end of this lesson here. Hopefully you've learned some stuff. Guess I need another cup of my coffee. Oh, yeah. You can't drink coffee in space like that. It would all float out, right? That's that whole thing of how we're on orbit and we stay in orbit. Coffee's the same way. If I have it right there, it's all going to be floating in space. So you don't want that. But here we are. We've come back down to space and we've landed now. And the space shuttle has been flown like a glider, like an airplane. And we've landed on a runway. And this one is landing in Florida. So this would have been my second mission right through here. And we just touched down and popped the drag chute to slow us down. And as you can see, the space shuttle has landed on its wheels and is rolling out. So I think I have about another minute or so to let you guys know, what is your future going to hold? Well, we're going to go back to space big time, right? So space technology is going to be with us going forward, and you guys can be a part of that. What I want you to know is the next rockets we're going to have are going to be a little bit more like this. We're not going to fly the space shuttle anymore. In fact, we're going to fly rockets where we're going to have the humans at the very top, which means when we bring them back to the Earth, we're going to do that by bringing them back on parachutes, and they're going to land in the oceans, just like the original astronauts did a long time ago, back even when they came back from the moon. Well, I think this is probably about time. I don't know about you. I've had a great 25, 30 minutes with you guys. Hopefully you've learned a little bit about space and what it takes. You know, you have to have the acceleration to get above the Earth's atmosphere and then counteract Earth's gravity, and how that's different from airplanes, and why airplanes could develop faster, and rockets, it's taken a long time to do that. Partly because, we all understand how rockets fly. We understand the equations, but we operate at high temperatures, velocities, and pressures. And so it's taken us a long time to continue to develop rockets so that we could do so safely. So as we close out right here, if you want to talk to me some more in the future, I hope you'll do so. This is my website right here, www.virtusadventures.com, and virtusadventures.com. And that's me wanting to contact with you all and talk about adventures and things like this. But as I sign off, I want to say thank you all for letting me be a part of your day-to-day. I wish you all the very best. Hey, stay courageous during this time of this virus. We're not going to have any trouble to get through this. Just be vigilant. Take good care of yourself and your families and friends. And I'm sure we're going to come out of this even stronger than before. So my very best. You all take very good care. And I look forward to hopefully teaching another class with you all in the future where we'll talk about satellites and space and things of that nature. All right. Well,